I'm Natasha, and I'm here today to talk about hacking the echo chamber in our industry, what that means, and how I think we can include and encourage new talent onto the speaker circuit while still respecting already established talent. So I've been a professional recruiter for more than 17 years. I'm the founder of Cyber Talent Partners, which is a specialist cybersecurity recruitment consultancy. So I've worked in the industry for almost 5 years now, and I honestly absolutely love it. I love the community that surrounds us. I love the everyday learning. And as I've progressed in this space, I've started to get more involved in speaking opportunities, both virtually and in person. And I'm here today because I want to see more people like me who have limited public speaking experience to be included and encouraged to come forward and share their unique views and experiences. So what do I mean by the echo chamber, and how does this relate to our industry? So as I say, I've been in the industry for almost 5 years now, and I've been attending various webinars, talks and conferences, etc. And one of the major concerns that I have is that often the opinions and solutions that we're hearing are just so similar from one event to the next. And actually what we're not seeing enough of perhaps is enough real solutions. We're circling a lot around similar challenges, and actually if those challenges didn't exist, then we wouldn't be discussing them from one event to the next. And another concern is that if we don't seek to challenge those opinions and learn from different perspectives, ideas or ways of thinking, then actually how does our industry progress, in standing up to threats? And how do we learn so that we can implement better practices, better processes, or even solutions? And as an industry that's ever evolving, our ideas, our experiences, our thoughts, our opinions also need to keep pace with this. So how do we get out of the echo chamber, and how does diversity of thought actually play its part in this? In my opinion, we need to encourage diversity of thought that essentially brings in opinions and experiences from outside of our bubble, that give us insight into knowledge and perspectives that we may not already have. And that will just allow us to actually consider new things from new points of view. And we need to increase the diversity of what we're hearing, that diversity of experience, diversity of perception, and diversity of background. But what I'd like to point out is, collectively as an industry, we're making incredible strides in attracting diverse minds into the industry. And amazing examples of this is, as a recruiter myself, over the last 12, 18 months or so, I've seen incredible career transitions from career policemen and women, from teachers, through to retail managers, all the way through to construction workers. And these individuals have transitioned into our industry without any prior cybersecurity experience, but what they come with is those incredible transitional skills that I think often get missed. And they're actually bringing such a positive impact into our industry. And so, what we also have to remember is that these individuals are members of our society. They're individuals that have all individually, one way or another, either directly or indirectly, been impacted by cyber breaches. And actually, if you think about it, often the worst affected have little opportunity to really express what's going on around them. And their diverse experiences, in my opinion, can help to enhance that collective intelligence, from problem solving through to, sort of coming up with new policies. And I think as a community, this incredible community that we are, we should be nurturing diversity of thought. We need to encourage more of that. We need to be providing a platform so voices and ideas are heard, and we need those different ways of thinking to be able to, tackle the threats that evolve so quickly, and we need alternative ways of thinking to really keep ahead. So I'd like to share an example that really resonates with me. This is a working example of where I think diversity of thought really plays its part in a professional capacity. So some of you may or may not have heard of the golden silence of Amazon. So within Amazon, for the last decade or so, they've actually started their meetings in total silence for the first 30 minutes. So rather than, the senior members of the leadership team, for example, actually, giving off a PowerPoint presentation, they actually provide members of the meeting with a 6-page memo. And that sort of summarises all of the points from the main agenda items. What I absolutely love about this is it gives the reader the opportunity to actually form their own opinion of the agenda, and it forces better thought and understanding of what points are more important than others. Rather than, we've all been in meetings before, and, whether they be high level or low level, we've been in meetings where, often the most senior person in the room will tell you, what's going on in the agenda, what's coming next, and often and naturally give off their own opinions of what that is. But what's really powerful about this is it commits people to deciding what they think before learning those opinions. And even more powerful is actually the most senior person speaks last to protect that diversity of thought. This example really, really resonates with me because I've been in many situations, and I'm sure some of you in the audience will probably feel this as well, where you've either been involved in a conversation or you've been in a meeting or even an interview where, let's say the person that you're having that conversation with is more senior than yourself, and actually you feel like your opinion is perhaps invaluable because you don't have the same level of experience as them. I know I've been there plenty of times, and sometimes still now, and sometimes you just have to push out of that comfort zone a little bit and have those conversations. But I think this example is a great working example. And so what are the tangible solutions? Thinking back to the Amazon example, and as I say, what I think is really powerful about that is that ability to build your own opinion, but not only that, to be able to share it in a safe environment. And if I reflect on my own experience speaking on a panel, my very first panel, I was one of 5 speakers. I was by far the least experienced speaker. As I say, it was my absolute first time. I was a bag of nerves, much like I am now. This is my first solo gig. And I remember sitting there, and I literally was given a bottle of water, and in this scenario I can't clutch onto it so you can't see my trembling hands, but I was trembling and holding this bottle for dear life, and all that was going through my head was, what value do I actually bring? What if what I'm saying actually isn't as strong as the people beside me, and I'm just a recruiter? What do I really kind of bring to this conversation? And when I reflect on that, I think, why on earth did I feel that way? So number one, I think the topic, I wasn't confident. It was a little bit out of my comfort zone, and I think that's really important to kind of digest and remember. And the second point is actually the questions in the panel came to me last. And so I'd heard the thoughts and opinions of everybody else first. And so almost felt like perhaps mine was invalid, or that I didn't have enough experience to be able to challenge the opinions of my fellow panelists. But perhaps as the least experienced, could I have shared my thoughts first? Would I have felt differently about that panel? What's really, really interesting about that panel was actually the feedback from the audience. And it wasn't about how good I was or how good I wasn't. It was actually really valuable to receive feedback that said, I really like that you came from a completely different perspective from everybody else. And that really made me realise that actually every single one of us, including me at that point, and regardless of how much or how little experience you have as a speaker on a panel or in a webinar, etc., that actually, because you come from a different perspective, you bring such a different way of thinking that is really valuable. And I think second to that as well is that we all downplay our professional knowledge or experience, or wherever that may be and what capacity that may be. because we take for granted what we know versus what we don't know. And so you think that everybody kind of knows what it is you do as a professional, your day-to-day, and certainly as a recruiter. I often think, everybody knows what that recruitment process is. Most people know how to write a CV. Actually, a lot of people are crying out for that information because they're not entirely sure what that should look like. I'm at the coalface of that as a recruiter. And so, job seekers look to me for that advice in terms of what does a hiring manager look for, etc. So I guess my point on that is that we need to ensure that we are inclusive as an industry in every way, shape and form, but that we can attract more diverse minds onto our stages and screens. We're crying out for that. And we need to nurture confidence by encouraging less experienced speakers to, in the example of a panel, for example, we need to encourage those less experienced speakers to actually be able to speak on specific points that they have raised in earlier preparations, which would give them convictions in their own points raised. And I kind of wish I'd had that in my first experience, but I can only reflect on that. And again, in the example of a panel discussion, with that in mind, we get to hear specific points raised from different perspectives rather than variations of the same point, which is often what we hear in panels and some webinars and what have you. What I think is also really important is dynamic panel moderation. For example, we often ask our best placed experts to provide their opinion on specific topics, but I think what we need is moderators to encourage the various different viewpoints and challenges to the opinions of the rest of the panel. An example of that and sort of that in work in progress is the last panel I did also at DTX up in Manchester, which was moderated by Lisa Forte, was a completely different experience to my first. Each viewpoint was challenged in a really constructive way. The subject was aligned to my expertise, but the panel was diverse. It had a balance of, newcomers, mid-professionals, established professionals, but all of us had come from really different backgrounds in terms of our experiences, in terms of, where and how we grew up, and we all had cross-sector and kind of cross-discipline experience. So we really need to nurture talent, and we need to be providing mentorship to help build confidence in public speaking. Some really, really great examples of this, and I have to shout out to the beer farmers, of course. This is where we are today. But other movements out there, including like Black Hat, B-Sides, for example, they're all absolutely fantastic platforms for newcomers because, they encourage new talent to submit a talk and to share their ideas and opinions. But they don't have to be right or wrong. It's different ways of thinking, and I think we all need to remember that. But also what's great about them is they provide mentorship as well if that's required, which is really, really important when you're doing your early stages in speaking or wanting to share any ideas. So how do we get out of our comfort zones? Okay, here I am on the screen. So you'll see a couple of shots of some activities that I've done over this past year. And I'm petrified of heights. There's me climbing a wall. And so this was an hour session at a clip and climb with my two children who literally whiz up and down these bloody walls. And I spent 50 minutes climbing up these walls. And because I was so scared to just trust the rope and allow it to kind of catch me to come back down, I literally toddled all the way back down, up and down, up and down. My kids absolutely peed themselves laughing. They thought it was hilarious. And it was in the last 10 minutes that I really pushed out my comfort zone and said, you know what, trust the process and just do it. And I did. And eventually I was so proud of myself. It was such a small win, but it was something I was super proud of. This next picture, so I took my family and we climbed what I didn't realise at the time, one of the more treacherous routes up Mount Snowdon. with 2 children in tow, and actually we just got just over halfway. Again, something I'm really, really proud of, because often when you're trying to push yourself beyond your comfort levels, for me, I also aim for perfection, and I had, we'd only pack trainers and just rugged gear and things like that, and I was like, oh, anyone else that does this, most accidents happen up Snowdon because you don't have the correct footgear and all of this kind of stuff. We only had a bottle of water between myself, my husband and my 2 children. So for me, that was a really, really big win. And this was the second panel that I talked about. For me, it's so easy when people say, oh, do you want to come and join this panel? I'd really like to hear your perspective. My first reaction is, how can I get out of this? And yet here I am again. But it's just continuously pushing and pushing and pushing past those boundaries. So, as I say, this is the very reason I'm here today, because I'm continuously trying to push past those boundaries. So thinking about what we've got in our industry, we are so fortunate to have thought leadership from some of the finest professionals who are consistent, who are fantastic ambassadors, and who inspire us and bring a wealth of knowledge that I'm sure all of us in this room have learnt from. And it's very easy, sort of, looking at your first speaking gigs or to share your opinions in whatever capacity that may be, to peg yourself or try and aspire to be just like them. I just had Philip Ingram in front of me, and the first thing I thought is, holy hell, how am I gonna top that? And that's a natural place to go, is when someone in front of you, or ahead of you or before you or what have you, is, but you want to aspire to eventually be like that. And so what we have to remember is that those individuals all started somewhere, probably as nervous as I am on the stage here today, but you've got to remember that a lot of work has gone into who they are and what they have achieved and where they are now. A lot of professional training, a lot of research and development work, etc. A lot of self-preservation, I suppose, and just self-development to kind of get to where you are. So I think what we have to remember is that we just cannot be, or will not be, amazing immediately. And actually, what is amazing? It's how you felt you delivered as an individual. And I know I'm not amazing standing right here, and I've got a long way to go, but I will continuously chip away at that and work to where I want to get towards. And I think we have to set really realistic expectations of, where we are today versus where we want to get to. And I don't think there's anything wrong with aspiring to be like those professionals, to have a polished presentation or a talk or a webinar or whatever that may be. And I think it's important to say, that we only measure ourselves against ourselves. How can we keep getting better and better? Don't compare ourselves to others. So in preparation of this talk, I actually spoke to Jessica Barker. I spoke to Sarah Armstrong-Smith, and I also spoke to Jake Moore. And I asked them to record the first time that they delivered a talk and what it felt like for them. And these are people, even if you've heard of one of these people, you'll know that they do a lot of circuits globally, in the UK, media, broadcast, etc. And so, what you're about to hear in terms of their experiences is it just makes you realise that they're just human beings. So Jessica recalled that when she first started speaking at sort of hacker and cybersecurity conferences around about 8 years ago, she was super nervous and anxious, to the point that she'd spend months preparing, and in her words, over-preparing and worrying, terrified of kind of public speaking, and would actually wake up in the night dreading a talk that could still be months ahead. I have to admit, I was the same when I first realised I got my talk accepted. But she really wanted to get her message about the human side of security, which is her specialist area, out there. And so she just kept going. And that, when we think about the thoughts and ideas that we want to share, we don't have to be specific professionals, but we may just want to share or air our opinions, and it's about finding that platform that supports that for you. But she said, the more she did it, the easier it slowly became. And she's, the advice that she offers is that if you're thinking of speaking but feeling anxious about it, feel the fear, do it anyway, because you will come off, that panel, that stage, whatever it may be, feeling like you've achieved something. Focus on your message and think about that talk as a conversation. So then I spoke to Jake Moore. So speaking to Jake on his first time public speaking was actually really, really similar in terms of his emotions and, the lead up to that. So he recorded his first presentation he did was actually in a library, and only one person showed up. I can't imagine what that felt like for him. And I think he did go into a slight panic. But you know what he did? He used that as an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to practice. I'm just going to use it as practice. I mean, I can't imagine directing this talk today just to one person. But, he used that as his practice, and it encouraged him to keep going. So he said, he still feels very nervous right before speaking. I mean, this guy's been on the BBC. He's been on the BBC News, etc. He's also been on the radio. There's been times that he records where he's been given 10 minutes notice to give a broadcast or what have you. And he's had to really research that information. But for him, it's just made him think on his feet rather than having months ahead to procrastinate, overthink it, etc. So, and then finally, when I spoke to Sarah Armstrong-Smith, so she told me that when she first started speaking, which was about 2016, she just finished implementing a large-scale business continuity program for an organisation. And she was invited to a conference in Tokyo to share her experiences after winning an internal competition. What she didn't know is that there was going to be over 1,000 people in attendance, and she had 10 minutes to talk. And they were super strict on time. So they had a bell for 1 minute to go and a bell to sound the end. And the end means the end. You literally have to stop. Whether you are finished or not, you had to stop. And her feelings at the time, she was petrified that she'd forget what she was saying. She was trying to memorize each and every slide and every word, thinking that it had to be pitch perfect. And she was just, simply worried that no one would care, or that what she had to say was of any value to this massive audience. And so the other point as well, growing bright red and feeling embarrassed, there's nothing worse because you just feel like you're going to tremble over your words. You've only got 10 minutes to slot, a real valuable pitch or piece of information to your audience. But all of these have now delivered hundreds of talks, and some of them across the globe. That's keynotes, panel discussions, round tables, etc. So I think the final point that I want to make is that we all have to start somewhere. And as Jess Barker pointed out, it doesn't have to be perfect. Each one can be like a practice for the next time. So thank you so much, all of you, for listening and coming along to this talk. And if you have any questions, you will find me at the bar drinking gin. Thank you.